here's two different kinds of measures. For example, miles per gallon is a rate because it's two different measures, miles and gallons. So I'm going to write miles per gallon. The division sign means per. And then to solve, I'm going to simplify using division. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 200 divided by 20. Plug that in, and I get 10 miles per gallon. So with ratios and rates and proportions in the sentence, the number that comes first is what goes on top of the fraction, and the number that comes second is what goes on bottom of the fraction. So here's an example. On a sales route, 15 gallons of gas are needed to go 225 miles. Find the number of miles driven per gallon. So this one is a little bit different because it's telling us in our second sentence miles per gallon, but up here it says 15 and then 225. So I'm going to flip it and follow what the sentence is asking me for. But if it doesn't give you a sentence telling you how it wants it, the number that comes first always goes first. So miles is going to go on top, and gallons is going to go on the bottom. Now to find the number of miles driven per gallon, once again, I'm just going to take my top number, hit the division sign, and then enter my bottom number. 225 divided by 15 gives me 15. So 15 gallons of gas will give you 15 miles driven per gallon. Okay, so I'm just finding out what the sentence is asking. A ratio is a comparison of two values. So earlier I had miles per gallon, so miles and gallons are two different measures, but here I'm doing two of the same. So height, feet, or I could have miles, or I could have gallons, or I could have yards, or I could have apples and apples. Like, it's comparing two of the same thing. Okay, so remember that. So the ratio of my height to yours might be 5 feet to 6 feet, which can also be written as 5 feet to 6 feet or 5:6 feet. So ratios can be written as a fraction using the word to and using a semicolon. And remember that the number that comes first goes on top. The important thing to remember for this too is that all of these equal the same thing. So if you see it written in any of these ways, know it's a ratio. So this is at a picnic, all the food, we're going to find the ratio of hamburgers to hot dogs when there are 45 hamburgers and 80 hot dogs. So what number goes on top of my fraction? 45 or 80? Yes, 45 is correct because it's the first number in the sentence. And it says find the ratio of hamburgers to hot dogs, so I know it'll be burgers on top and dogs on bottom. And then on the bottom, I'm going to put 80. Whenever we're working with rates, ratios, and proportions, we always want to simplify. So can 45 divided, or can 45 eightieths be simplified, or is it in simplest form? Can I simplify this, yes or no? No. Okay, So my quick tip for simplifying, if it ends in an even number, if both numbers end in an even number, it can be divided by 2. If both numbers end in 5, or both numbers end in 0, or both numbers end in a 5 and a 0, it can be simplified dividing by 5. So I see a 5 and a 0, 45, 80. So I'm going to divide both of them by 5 because I know they're both divisible by 5. 45 divided by 5 gives me 9. 80 divided by 5 gives me 16. Is this fraction in simplest form? Yes, it is, because 9 is only divisible by 3 and 3, and 16 has not a 3 that it's divisible by. So my answer is 9/16 in simplest form. Okay, this one is what your homework would look like. The trail you're helping to construct rises 200 feet vertically for every 1,200 feet horizontally. What is the ratio of vertical rise to horizontal run? So vertical on top and horizontal on bottom. So what number will go on top? What number is next to the word vertical? Someone tell me in the chat. 200, yep. And then on the bottom, 1,200. Now looking at this, can I simplify? Yes. I know that 200 goes into both of these numbers, so I'm going to divide by 200. If you aren't sure, you could always check before you write it down on paper, or just start with what you know and then keep simplifying it. 200 divided by 200 gives me 1. 1,200 divided by 200 gives me 6. I know this is in simplest form because 1 cannot be simplified further. So the answer to this one is 1/6. That makes sense? Or do we need a little bit more help with ratios, or do we got it? Okay, last up we have proportions. This is what we're going to be doing a lot of the rest of the semester with work keys. So it's important that we understand it. So proportions are 2 equal ratios. You can use proportions to solve unknown quantity. So looking here at my 2 circles, they're both shaded in the same amount and have the same amount of white. So I see that the 2/3 is shaded and the 6/9 is shaded. They both have an equal section that is not shaded. I like to think of proportions too as simple, a simplified fraction is also a proportion because 6/9 can be simplified to 2/3. Another way to check the proportions. What just happened? Is by cross multiplying. So we can cross multiply, and here's how we do it. We draw an X, and it's 2 times 9 equals 6 times 3. What's 2 times 9? 18. What's 6 times 3? 18. Does 18 equal 18? Yes, it does. So I know it's a proportion because they're equal to each other. So here's how we're going to be using proportions this semester. We're going to be solving for an unknown quantity. So we're going to do the same thing we just did with cross multiplying to solve. So I'm going to do my cross multiply. So I get 5 times 24 equals 8 times X. So I'm going to simplify by doing the math. 5 times 24 gives me 120. What's 8 times X?
You would need to divide 120 by 8.
Close, that's the next step. So 8 times x, I can simplify as just writing 8x because two numbers next to each other, we know they're being multiplied. because I can't multiply a number by a letter. So like Armando said, I'm going to divide by 8 on both sides to figure out what x is. So I'm getting the x by itself. 8 divided by 8 cancels out. 120 divided by 8. When I plug that into my calculator, what do I get? 15. Good job. So then I can double check that my answer makes sense. If I'm unsure, by cross multiplying again with both values. And I know that this should be 120. What do I get when I plug 8 times 15 into my calculator? I get 120. Equal each other, so it's correct. Okay, and then this is what your homework will look like. A story problem. A truck can travel 560 miles on 28 gallons of gas. How far can he travel on 35 gallons of gas? So once again, I'm going to use my knowledge of a ratio to set this up. What number will go on top? The first number in my sentence, and that number is 560. So I'm going to put 560 on top and 28 on the bottom. Miles, gallons. Next, when I set up a proportion, I want to keep gallons on the bottom and miles on the top. I want to keep them the same. So when you go straight across, it's the same measurement. So then I come to my second sentence and it says 35 gallons. So I know that will go next to the word gallons. And I'm solving for miles. I'm going to cross multiply. Can someone plug 560 times 35 into their calculator? Perfect. And then I get 28x. Like we did before, we're going to divide. You're always going to divide with a proportion. So I'm going to divide both sides by 28. And what's 19,600 divided by 28? 700. Yep. So I know that he can travel 700 miles with 35 gallons of gas. All right. So that is proportions. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the homework. It's 9 problems due Monday at midnight, like always. If you need help, schedule office hours. You have about 13 minutes left, so you should be able to get started with it. Does anyone have questions? Stop the recording.